Hi, I've been asked to talk about three works of mine which were commissioned by the Meir Rimon Fund through the International Horn Society. I've had, like I said, three times, and three of these are my finest works, really. The first one I wanted to talk about was commissioned in 1993 from Charles Putnam from the American Horn Quartet and the Meir Rimon Foundation. It's called Lives of Jack McBride. It's for tenor, horn, and violin and piano. For me, it was an opportunity for me to explore history and historical events. As you can see in my library, this is also my composition studio. I'm very, very fascinated in history, so I have a lot of history books, not just dry factual history books, but also historical fiction, which I think is a great way for creative people to put their own interpretation on historical events, which is what I do in my historical compositions. In Six Lives of Jack McBride, we have an Orkney Island theme, which represents Jack McBride, and then he is hypnotized and brought back through six various lives that he experienced, and he describes them in detail. In each of the episodes that he describes, we have a new, completely different theme. So the different movements are the very opening, the hypnotizing of Jack McBride, and then suddenly he's at a concentration camp in Auschwitz, and then he's on the plains in Texas, called Texas on a Sunday, in which I use an authentic Baptist hymn. And then comes the Mutiny on the Bounty, describing the burning of the Bounty ship after the mutiny, in which I use an old sea shanty, one that I made up, but it's a sea shanty sounding piece. Then comes Greenland, about the lost colony in Greenland by the Danes. And then comes the Sermon on the Mount, which goes without saying. I use the Beatitudes as my text. And then comes the conquering of Masada. So it's a very exciting piece, and I think personally it would make a great video or maybe a shorts film, since it's about 20 minutes. I myself have sung the part of Jack McBride many times, and so I'm always looking for more opportunities to do that. It's a very challenging tenor part. So that's Six Lives of Jack McBride. This is the next piece that was commissioned by the Meir Rimon Commissioning Assistance Program in the International Horn Society, The Scorpion in the Sand. This was an initiative by Thomas Joslein and the Chamber Music Society of Central Virginia in Richmond. So there's an old Arabic lesson that the wise men used to teach to their children about life, a very philosophical lesson. It has to do with the scorpion in the sand. So what we have here is when a scorpion approaches you in the desert, all you have to do to keep that scorpion from attacking you is draw a giant circle around it. The scorpion will not dare cross the barrier. It can't see what's on the other side, and it'll think that's its wall. But it's still pretty mean, and it starts to get desperate because it wants out. So what happens if you were to cut it in half? Now the scorpion gets really aggressive. It really wants out of there. It gets more panicked. And all he has to do is look over the ridge, but he can't do that. What happens if you make it into a quarter? Now the scorpion is really hemmed in and really upset and gets more and more crazy until you draw a circle around him. And then in its desperation and in fit of anger, the scorpion simply stings itself to death. And that's an incredible philosophical lesson. The Scorpion in the Sand is probably the most experimental of my works when it comes to actual contemporary sounding pieces. I've often used 12-tone technique in my music, although that's not in this piece. 12-tone to me is very interesting because I don't really consider it contemporary. I consider it more romantic in an Egon Schiele kind of way. But I use that a lot. In Scorpion in the Sand, I wanted to represent the insanity of the entire scene and the neurotic aspects of this lesson. And so I delved pretty deep into experimental harmonies. And I also used my own invented Maghreb or Arabic sounding melodies in the piece. So that was the technique used. The piece is for horn, cello, and piano. In 2014, Andrew Pelletier in Michigan commissioned me through the Meir Rimon Foundation and the International Horn Society to write a piece for him, which he was going to perform at the International Horn Society workshop in London a couple of years ago. I was in Paris a lot that year, and I was reading about the French Baroque composer Couperin, and so I was also fascinated with the Goldberg Variations, which I consider to be one of the greatest pieces of music ever written by a human being. And so I wanted to write a piece that used a theme, in this case La Bandoline by Couperin, and then I wanted to make a series of variations on that, reflecting all different types of styles. And so, if you're not familiar with the music of Couperin, it has to be heard on the harpsichord. I mean, this piece would actually sound really great with horn and harpsichord, but it's characterized by a lot of ornamentations. So this is the theme that I used. And it goes on more or less like that. It's quite a long theme. And so what happened is that if you're familiar with a lot of my music, particularly the theme and variations, you know that one of the things I like to do is to very slowly, through the variations, develop this theme, change it, morph it ever so slightly until it arrives at a variation, usually around about 3 or 4, in which it is actually a completely different melody, a melody very, very characteristic of my style, recognizable in my style. But yet somehow it's still very reminiscent of the original theme. So that's a fun thing that I like to do, and this is definitely the case in the Couperin Variations. So the Couperin Variations is an alternative piece to my sonata and horn and piano as a recital piece. As a matter of fact, I'll be playing it at the Bromov Chamber Music Academy in Czech Republic this summer, and I've also created a version for flute, horn, and piano, which really adds a lot to it, the flute being a wonderful Baroque instrument. And it's thanks to the Meir Rimon Fund at the International Horn Society that I was able to recover a lot of my expenses and travel to fun places like Paris in order to write the Couperin Variations.